Day 17, I believe it is. Day 17. Fuck. As you can see, there's still shit ton of snow here. You can see us struggling here in a bit because this snow is kind of soft. So every time we step in, bam, get stuck in holes, but that's okay. So it's part of the process. Hold on, Finn. Hold on. All right. So 17. Man, life is weird, man. Life is really weird. So I started classes again. Again, very excited for this semester. It's gonna be different in I should say it's gonna be challenging in a different kind of way. Last semester was a lot more logical, more mathematical kind of thinking. This one, this semester, one class is probably going to be the most frustrating. That's going to be Spanish. Why Spanish? So I grew up as a native speaker. But the one thing that I didn't do is I never studied the language formally. So I never took classes on how to read or how to write. So my fluency with Spanish is not fluent. I can read and I can write, but it's not as good as my English. So I'm taking this class again as a challenge for myself because I know with English I'm more proficient, more competent. With Spanish, not so much. The reason I'm taking this class again, it's not just a challenge, but let's go, come on. But I want to become better with the language. I want to be able to go beyond beginner, intermediate in writing and reading. I want to get a little better. I want to write poems in Spanish. I want to be able to read poetry in Spanish. Come on, let's go. The reason I want to do this is because even though I can speak it and I can get along pretty well, there's something about, I use the way I think about this, right? I think about ancestors. I think about what my ancestors had to go through and how they lived. And in this day and age, it's something that we see, these holes. It's something that we see as normal. Normal is boring. However, I think sometimes we discount what we think is normal and what we think is boring. The reason I say this is because if you think of our ancestors before writing, I mean, even after writing, a good majority of the population was not literate. They couldn't read or write. And what does reading and writing do? It essentially allows you to transfer your thoughts to a medium other than spoken words, spoken language. And the cool thing about that is that you don't have to be in that present moment to be able to receive the message. What do I mean by that? If you think about how our ancestors probably lived back in the day, their immediate present moment, their immediate environment is what dictated the flow of information coming in and what dictated the flow of information coming out. So our ancestors really they didn't have access to the kind of information that we have now from all sorts of different kinds of people, from all walks of life, all kinds of cultures. What they had was access to now. That was it. They didn't have books that they can read from 50 years ago, 100 years ago. They didn't have access to poems that were in their minds that then they wanted to share with other people 50 years down the line. They didn't have that. Well, they kind of did. There's the old tradition of poetry, which is what is like the foundations of poetry, where people would memorize these long epic poems. But again, unless you spoke the particular language, unless you were in that particular tribe or wherever they were located at, if you were separated by time or space, aka you lived halfway across the world, aka the poetry or mics that they had back in the day, right? The parties that they threw. If you weren't there, say you were out hunting, or you were out on some sort of raid or some sort of scavenging mission, or meeting someone else in a different village, you weren't there for it. So you were limited by time and space. And one of the beauties, again, not just of the internet and not just of this phone that I can record on, is that we have asynchronous communication now. Now I'm recording this in my now. However, a week from now, 2 weeks, a year, 10 years, who knows how the internet's going to evolve then. But for the most part, this medium captures this immediate moment and preserves it for the future. So that way people can see what the past was like, and they can have a very vivid description of what that's like. Say hi, Finn. How that snow melted. Cool, right? And again, just that ability that we as human beings now have, that, like, to me, that's fucking mind-blowing. And going back to my original point of why I want to get better with my Spanish is because there's so much literature out there that I can't access because my Spanish is just not good enough to be able to understand what some of these people from the past, people in the present are saying. So again, that's why I want to do it. It's going to be an interesting challenge. One of my favorite poets, Francisco Alarcón. Fuck. Look at this snow. Finn, come here. He wrote a lot of stuff in Spanish, and just thinking about his life, like the way he lived, like, again, shout out to David Tomas Martinez, another one of my favorite poets. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have discovered Francisco Alarcón. Whew, starting to sweat over here. Let me take a break. I'm gonna pause this here. Look at this crazy stuff. All right, part two. Again, what Francisco Alarcón did is that this man, this is fucking mind-blowing, right? Because he dedicated himself to this. Spent years working on this. If you see me walking super slow, it's because these, you'll see it right now. As soon as I step, up to my kneecap. As soon as I step, up to my kneecap. As soon as I step, up to my kneecap. The reason I find his life's work so powerful, and why I'm trying to collect all of his books, even trying to get some of the early prints that I think are no longer in circulation. Maybe someone out there can help me out. Specifically his like first books, I can't remember the titles. But anyways, the work that he put out, this man went to Mexico, discovered that one of his ancestors was actually, I think he said it was one of the Spanish priests during the time that the Spanish came over and colonized what is now called Mexico, right? And it turns out this was like again, an ancestor of his. He was somehow related to this man. And what he did was he studied the original, I think you pronounce it Nahuatl language. So that way, when he read his, again, the Spanish priest, I forget the name off the top of my head, but he read his works because he actually documented, again, the ability to be able to read and write. He documented the practices, the spells with the poetry, and just like the daily lifestyle things of the indigenous people of the Americas, of the Aztecs, I think it was. It could be the Mayans, I could be wrong. But he documented their lifestyles. He called them their incantations. Not because he was fascinated by them. Maybe he was, right? You have to just spend that much time to document, or, yeah, to basically document someone else's lifestyle and livelihood and cultural ideas and thoughts, to try to understand them and to see how they view the world. He studied their native language so that way he can translate the Spanish priest writings into English. Like, how fucking crazy is that? Like, this man spent his life doing that and created beautiful poetry in the process. I'll link to some of the books down below. But again, just to think of someone who no access to the internet, right? Kind of just went into a library, which, if you think about the internet's kind of like a library. It's a repository of information, and was able to come across the Spanish priest and his writings, who might have been an ancestor of his, to essentially go back into the past, see or read and interpret what that lifestyle was like, and then take those indigenous people's stories, translate them from the Spanish and Nahuatl, and then turn it into English. Like, fuck. So again, to me, that's fucking mind-blowing. That's absolutely mind-blowing, because it makes you think, like, what, with the power of technology now, especially the way translation services are getting better. Come on, let's go. How again, to take the skill, the ability of reading, writing, and speaking other languages, and then to be able to go back into the past, read original texts, translate those into the language of the now, language of the present. Like, I don't think there's enough credit given to artists like that. I really don't think there is. Simply because, come on, let's go. They're essentially recreating the past through the lens of whatever present culture, worldview, land they're now. Let's go, come on. And then creating books, creating works of poetry that he then shared, got published. So some dude in fucking 2021 could read them and appreciate the beauty that he created, and still to this day just in awe of what he's done. Like, that's magic, man. That's some straight up magical shit. So it's just come on, let's go, back up, come on. Nope, it's just magical. It's magical that we have that ability, because we didn't have that back in the past. And again, you don't read and you don't write. How do you talk to the future? How do you communicate to them, right? How do you communicate to your future self? How do you communicate to your descendants? What would you want to communicate to them? To me, that's where the beauty of writing and reading come in. And I say reading and writing because they're like a push-pull combo. It's a synergistic back and forth interplay of energies between them. Because to read is to take in, to receive, to be open. To write, it's to focus, to extend, to, or they call it like the masculine energy. Come on, let's go up. To go out into the world, to penetrate, to create. Reading is like the receiving energy, the feminine energy. Takes in, absorbs, holds. And to me, like, that's a beautiful thing. I guess the modern day equivalent now would be coding. creating programs. Next step would be creating programs that learn from themselves, that code themselves. Come on. Up and up. Like, again, and look what code has done for us, right? Code has now created the internet. It's created a way for human beings to communicate to the future, to communicate their experiences, to showcase their experiences, to provide actual context in the environment that they're in. And look at this. Where in the past we have done something like this, where I'm talking about Francisco Alarcón while showing, again, just to showcase the beauty all around me. Like look at this. Look at these colors. Look at this nature. Look at this. Where else could I do that but in this moment? Man, maybe, come on, let's go, man. Maybe it's one of the beauties about why we're born, the day and age that we're born, right? Is to come into this world, recognize our own limitations, but also recognize where our boundaries have been extended by other human beings. Because let's be honest, we were us on our own. Y'all think I'm kidding? Look at this shit. My fucking kneecap. Where else could we have had the ability to communicate like this? Where else will we have the magic of being able to transfer portions of ourselves into a medium where we can express whatever little, big, bullshit, intelligent, whatever kind of fucking thought you want to express? Like, where else could we do that but now? But now, because of other human beings, because of people who know how to code, because of people who have little by little stretched the boundaries of our imagination, stretched the boundaries of what we think is possible, we have the ability to communicate in this kind of way. And to me, like, that's, again, straight up magic. And I think it was Arthur C. Clarke. He's a famous science fiction author. He once wrote that any sufficiently advanced technology is akin to magic. And if you think about what we can do now, imagine what our ancestors would have thought if they could see past versions of themselves communicating in the present, talking about what their life was like years ago, or maybe sharing a song, maybe sharing a story, maybe sharing an idea, maybe sharing just some motivation to not give up when they're feeling down. Like, that's magical. That's magical. Because some more answers back then, they didn't have that ability, man. They were probably in environments like this, fucking struggling. Again, some of our ancestors are just struggling out there in the wilderness on their own. Maybe they have their, hey, come on, Finn, come on. They have their buddies there, and they're working together to survive, to stay warm, to try to find food. Then all of a sudden they come across, boom, tracks, a trail, and they're like, oh, fuck, I'm not alone here. I'm not alone. Here's a gift from whatever gods are out there, whatever powers are out there, and they've presented me with the gift, a path to potential help, to potential food, to potential a warm place to sleep. And the internet's no different from this. It's just a different metaphor. It's just different. But it's kind of the same thing. Stopping. It's kind of the same thing, because if it wasn't for David Tomas, I would never discovered Francisco Alarcón. I would have never bought some of his books, read his poetry, and started to appreciate who he was as a human being. And again, he's rest in power. He's already out there. The rest of the consciousness, who knows what happens after you die. But to come across this man's work without ever being able to speak to him face to face in this time and present moment, but to come across the legacy of his work and appreciate it. If we share anything in common as brown men from a country that doesn't really, like how we talk, because we talk Mexican. If there's anything that we might share in common, it's this idea that that legacy, that body of work, these poems, somewhere out there, somebody is reading them, appreciating them, and just beginning to glimpse the beauty of what treasure this man had left behind. Because again, he also didn't just write poetry, he also wrote books for kids. Like how, like he was thinking about educating the little ones. And again, it's such an honor and a privilege to exist in a world like that, where there's people out there like that are creating these works, leaving this legacy behind, this information, where if we're open to receiving it, we can start opening up ourselves up too, and realizing like, you know what, this is a fucking lovely ass human being, man. This is, even though I'll never get to meet him, never get to see him because he is, you know, dead, rest in power, I can still appreciate his existence, even if I never got to know him. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we now have the ability to be able to do, to extend ourselves across time and space. Across, stop, nope. Across time and space, and to communicate. Come on, let's go. To be able to communicate across time and space, where we're not limited to the present moment, but we can extend across realities, man. If you think about it, who knows what technology is going to look like in the future? Who knows? But again, beautiful time to be alive. It's a beautiful thing. Francisco Alarcón, thank you. David Tomas, thank you. Poetry, thank you. The coders, everyone out there, just little by little working on those little tiny pieces of the pie and just extending out, so our imagination can also extend out with it and maybe somewhat penetrate beyond those barriers, constraints that we think are possible, to bring, again, sufficiently advanced technology that's magical. Anyways, thank you for listening. You made it this far. Hit me up. I'll send you a book. Say bye, Finn. It is so focused. What are you focusing on? How am I, Finn? Look at this. Look at this doggo. Wow.